Blessed day, soul family. Welcome back. It's Monday, Mental Health Monday, and second week of May. We're going to be going over our calendar poetry for May, and we're going to be talking about today the the brain on Qigong, the brain for Mental Health Monday. Let's see. Also, um, in that regard, the brainwave states, altered state of consciousness, the default mode network, and the function and the why. Would we want to put Qigong on the brain and connection to hypnosis there? So, hope you all had a great weekend. I have some stuff to share about this weekend, but I won't do it in this video. Let's go to, I'll share it throughout the week, but let's go to our poetry. And I'd like to do that before we get started. I think that will help set the tone and the foundation. When the physical body does not move, the the shin, the emotional mind, will be peaceful automatically. When the shin does not move, the shen will abide automatically. So when the physical body does not move, the emotional mind will be peaceful. When the emotional mind does not move, then the spirit will follow suit. So XIN is shin and spirit is shun. Probably the tones aren't right. My teacher would get mad at me there. But essentially, stopping or restraining, self-restraint, self-refraining, um, inducing a static state, whether you're sitting or standing. Um, when the physical body does not move, the shin will be peaceful automatically. So one could argue with that and say, well, if I sit still for 30 seconds to a minute, my thoughts start to race. I can't do that. Okay. Um, and then it continues to say, the shin, the emotional mind, when it does not move, the shin will abide automatically. So the concept then, of course, for folks who have been sitting or meditating for uh, long periods of time, you know that the emotional mind will subside, it'll calm down, hence the spirit will centralize and settle as well. But if you're just watching this and you're just finding this, you've never tried meditation before or qigong or anything like that, then you'll be happy to know that when you sit and you are bombarded by your thoughts, there's a practice that can be, or there's a phenomena that can be described and more conveyed with the yin yang symbol. So basically, what happens is from this lower side, there's four phases that the scholars divided the yin yang symbol into. Um, so let's look at this one. Yeah, we could talk like this. So one, two, three, four, right? So when you sit, this would be this small circle here. When you sit, you want the mind to be still like that and the spirit. However, when you sit and keep the body still, the mind actually is going to go on this path, this trajectory, where it's early morning and then mid morning and then the highest point of the sun, midday, is the most yang. However long that takes, it's a natural cycle. What that means, though, is in meditation and in the mind, the thoughts have a similar trajectory. Maybe the feeling or the bombardment of thoughts has a similar trajectory, in that the mind and the self governing interpretation of thoughts is going to go from a low morning to a mid to a high morning, and then and then a early evening, middle, late evening framework. What does that mean? That means that your sense and your feeling of the thoughts are going to rise and they will reach a peak, or your sense or feeling will reach a peak. The thoughts maybe will reach a peak, but then they'll start to drop and subside. One could say each thought will arise and fall. One could say the session or the feeling of thoughts will arise and fall. So that's something to keep in mind and to mention as we talk more. With that, I want to go to Qigong and trance, and we're going to talk about the inner critic and then that self-governing inner voice, and then that how that affects how Qigong affects that and the default mode network. So let's first look into altered states of consciousness. Okay. And that's any condition that's significantly different from normal. Okay. It's good to have that as a frame of reference. A waking beta wave state. We're going to look more at brain states in a second. Okay. It's a non-ordinary mental state. A broader term includes states induced by substances or by meditation or trance. If it's a substance intoxication, a transient reversible condition of altered consciousness or behavior caused by a recent substance use, there is drug-induced altered states of consciousness. Um, and then the characteristics of altered states of consciousness are temporary and involve a shift in perception, cognition, emotion, or self-awareness. That self-awareness I think is important here. So psychoactive substances, alcohol, cannabis, psychedelics, anesthesia, those can induce states of ASC, altered states of consciousness. They can range from euphoria to a heightened sense of sensory input to hallucinations and intense introspection. So remember, an altered state of consciousness can be characterized by a shift in perception, cognition, emotion, or self-awareness. We're going to ask, how does hypnosis shift perception, cognition, emotion, and self-awareness? We should know that um, Qigong targets the theta wave states that's associated with light sleep, deep meditation, vivid daydreaming, and high creativity. There's a really nice article here that gives a little bit more information, which I'll link in the description. This is a good visual for the brainwave states. You can see here in the green banner, gamma is associated with insight, learning, problem solving. Beta, active thinking, alertness, scrolling. That's what scientists say is the waking state, the beta state. Alpha, relaxation, meditation, lucid awareness. And theta, daydreaming, intuition. Delta, deep sleep and recovery. So you could also think of these wave states as similar to the the yin yang that we just looked at here. So let's just say here at the very bottom is the least active. We go to mid and then to the highest active brainwave state, and then these lower. And we could say, like in the day, we do this sort of thing here, whether we're arising from sleep and we go through our day, similar to the sun, reaching the highest max and yang, and then start to decline or subside or descend, eventually going back to sleep for the day. So there's also the nervous system regulation. So you can think of the gamma waves, maybe it's very active. So one could say that the the nervous system is active and activated in a healthy way. In a stressful, non-healthy way, I'm not sure what brainwave states are associated. However, what I do know is that doing Qigong and doing meditation starts to activate alpha and theta as we are striving to go into a semi-sleep state. So relaxation, daydreaming, intuition, it doesn't say it here, but theta we attribute to semi-sleep, which would then bring down the heart rate and the lung rate. So I'll link this here. There's an interesting story about Salvador Dali and how he took a nap holding a key with a plate under or with a plate on the floor. When he would fall asleep and drop the key would hit the plate and wake him up. And this is how he would um, facilitate and induce his creativity. So the inner critic, that's associated with the default mode network. But remember that the inner critic is associated with self-awareness. We talked about that and how when you have an altered state of consciousness, you have a perceptual shift in self-awareness. The inner critic is connected to self-awareness. There's different systems that use the word inner critic. It's not necessarily a clinical term, but it's widely known in mental health and mindfulness circles. In psychoanalysis, it's mostly related to the superego, coined by Freud to describe the part of the mind that acts as a moral censor and internalizes societal and parental cues. This is interesting too because last week we were talking about the mask and the dropping of one's mask, right? But how the mask has a yin and yang aspect to it because you have to have a societal mask in order to coexist with societal norms. You have to have an aspect of conformity in society. The question is when you conform too much and lose yourself, and how to maintain a sense of oneself and conform to society. So internal family systems, it's a therapeutic model. The inner critic is identified as a manager, a part that tries to protect the individual from external pain or rejection through harsh self-policing. That's the inner critic. So the inner critic is a little bit of like a buffer between one and society. How is society going to respond? And do I want to take that risk? Do I want to say something? Do I want to, self-censor maybe? And then in cognitive behavioral therapy, clinicians often refer to this as negative self-talk or maladaptive self-criticism. Where does it come from? So, psychologists agree that the inner critic's not something you're born with, it's internalized over time, again, referring to socialization. If you're familiar with Qigong meditation, embryonic breathing, then this would be interesting to you because you know that the process from birth up to all the developmental stages of human life, we are being socialized and conditioned and in a way brainwashed. So we have to have an awareness and an aspect and a literacy to talk about that. Through interjection, it's the psychological process of unconsciously absorbing the voices of authority figures, usually parents, teachers, or influential peers. You essentially start saying to yourself, what was once said to you? A harsh inner critic often develops as a protective mechanism. If a child is in an environment where they are frequently judged, the brain may decide if I yell at myself first, it will hurt less when someone else does it. And then here we go, societal pressure can also stem from a broader societal expectation, ego ideal, the standards we believe we must meet to be worthy of love or success in a family or in society. So in Qigong and in hypnosis, researchers have observed a reduction in the connectivity between the executive control center and the default mode network, effectively unhooking the self-aware critic from current actions. And I think I have something here on the default mode network. So this is a bit of an image. This is a better image of the default mode network in terms of it's associated with memory, emotion, rumination, and the future. But it's a little bit, remember, an at rest, not an active, daily active gamma state, but a little bit maybe of an alpha or theta state. I think we'll maybe get to that. But it processes the default mode network processes autobiographical information. There's that self aspect. It activates in the absence of a pressing task. So, right, well, if you're doing something actively, the default mode network won't be activated. The mind is being and the energy is being allocated elsewhere. Default mode network supports mind wandering or rumination, again, that self-reflection, and it communicates with language and speech areas, and that may give rise to internal monologue. Let's look here a little bit more, and you'll get an idea with this as well.
The default mode network is also connected to self-awareness and social cognition.
Things like thinking about your friends and the attributes of your friends and thinking about yourself and your place in society.
Which requires an interior theory of mind.
Thinking about what other people are thinking.
Like you're constantly running a model of someone you're talking to about what they're thinking and feeling in response to what you're saying. And that's really important because if you're way off, you lose a friend or you could get punched.
Absent external stimuli, the default mode network turns inward.
The DMN switches or defaults to an internally focused thought process such as self-reflection, daydreaming, mind-wandering.
When mind-wandering, we're often recalling personal experiences and envisioning the future.
All of these kinds of complex and interesting introspective and evaluative types of processing tends to engage the default network.
So that's really interesting, right? Because we need to kind of think about those activities or what I like to call transitionary states, where you're going from doing something and you're active and engaged in many aspects, mind, body, breath, what have you, and then you have to change. Let's say like you're in school, the bell rings and you go to a different class, or you're getting ready for work, and maybe you do a walk before work. You eat breakfast before work, and then you drive to work, and then you arrive at work, and then you start doing work. Each of those states have a little bit of a transitionary state where you're non-active and the default mode network can activate. So that means you have a sense of self-introspection, and then you have the which is the default mode network, and then the other active states. And here, interestingly, what they said was that the default mode network is that inner awareness and also the societal awareness, a little bit of that yin and yang aspect. So let's go back here. Remember, hypnosis effectively is the unhooking of the self-aware critic from current actions. Hypnosis then, consequently, that's the little bit of the function of hypnosis, to make one open and essentially open to suggestion from the person that's facilitating the hypnosis. Okay. So in Qigong, similar to other meditative practices, that involves anchoring attention into breath or body sensations as interoception. And this suppresses the default mode network, and it reduces the frequency of intrusive self-critical thoughts or rumination. So that's what the Qigong movement and meditation has the effect on this area. Scientists say that Qigong can induce a trance-like state. I equate trance-like state to an altered state of consciousness, right? It's different from normal waking beta wave state. And remember, in Qigong, we're trying to activate or facilitate theta wave states, right? So both in Qigong and hypnosis induce deep relaxation and a trance-like state, increasing suggestibility. That was the word I was looking for a second ago. Suggestibility. In this state, the mind's more receptive to positive physiological or emotional suggestions, such as the flow of qi or safety signals. Safety signals is important. You gotta bring down the sympathetic response, relax, and then that induces uh, bodily cues within inside the body biologically to induce that parasympathetic state of relaxation and rest, in contrast to sympathetic. The theta wave activity in both practices are associated with an increase in frontal midline theta waves, a brain rhythm linked to deep concentration and internalized attention. This specialized focus leaves little bandwidth for inner critic to operate. Qigong specifically targets the ventral vagal system, which sends safety signals to the brain. When the nervous system switches toward parasympathetic dominance, rest and digest, the biological drive for hypercritical self monitoring is lowered. Hypercritical self monitoring is lowered when the parasympathetic is activated. That means that Qigong inducing relaxed states is going to be good for any state that one is in where there's hypercritical self monitoring. Vegetative biofeedback, scientists view Qigong as a form of ancient biofeedback where practitioners learn to consciously control automatic functions like heart rate and skin temperature, effectively overriding the stress induced patterns the inner critic typically utilizes. Why is the inner critic producing stress? Why does the inner critic produce stress? Because the inner critic is, um, I would say, as we get older, the inner critic has inertia from childhood to constantly seek validation from external sources. As it said there, the authority figures, parents, what have you, boss, teachers. And so that what would you say, comparison and that reflection induces stress in the mind as you're wondering what's going to be the societal implication. Am I going to be safe, or am I going to suffer some sort of societal consequences in not being accepted, in being maybe scapegoated, some sort of targeting campaign, could take suit, which essentially gives us the concept and the idea of witch hunt, an example of witch hunt, right? Not 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 willing probably to follow in line with society's movement forward. So that's the presentation for today. So let's just summarize, right? How Qigong is on the brain. Is it a self-hypnosis, right? When we're doing Qigong, we're activating the body, and we're activating the energy by moving the body. So this could have a number of effects. Some could say there's no consequence to that. But if you're stimulating a dormant emotion and there's an uprise, then you might be faced with an emotion that you haven't dealt with in a long time or in a while, you've been trying to suppress, what have you. So we just need to be aware that when we're moving our body, we're stimulating energy and an emotion. Um, and with that on the same side, if we still the body, as in the poetry for May, then the mind can start to move. And we would have to down regulate the movement in the mind. Okay. Essentially, what we want is stillness in mind and body and movement in mind and body. When we want harmony and balance to what suits the moment or for what suits the moment. Okay. And then so what Qigong does, remember, is when we're trying to induce a relaxed state, we're trying to activate the theta brainwave states, which has now this whole cascade of maybe emotions, sensations, and feelings as we're coming down from that beta state, coming into theta state. That would be here, right? So if you arrive to class or something or to the Zoom meeting and you're in gamma and you're here or you're in beta, right? You're having to come down to alpha and then theta if you do the movement and the follow the instructions properly and go into the theta wave state, into the semi-sleep state. Just that transitionary process is going to have some sort of sensational characteristics, thought characteristics, mind and energy characteristics. So we need to be attuned and watch those things. I think for as teachers as well, watching the students and seeing how they're responding. And then is that similar to hypnosis? My teacher used to say, yeah, Qigong can be considered a self-hypnosis. So what I would love to do is as we move forward, maybe spend some time in what we suggest to ourselves, because if we're in hypnosis or self-hypnosis, then we increase suggestibility. So we got to be aware and conscious of that. If we are increasing suggestibility, those suggestions can come from the outside, but they can also come from within. What if we induce a suggestibility from ourselves and what we want? That is what I'm curious to discover and what I've explored in my Qigong. If you put yourself in an open, relaxed place and state, can you be suggestive to oneself? What would you suggest? And then that would then bring about other questions. Well, what am I doing? Where do I want to go? Who do I want to be? Who do I want to please? Who do I not want to please? Where do I want to put my energy? How do I see myself in 3, 5, 10 years? What have you? So let me know what you think about that. We're going to continue tomorrow with Tai Chi Tuesday, suggestibility, because all of the relaxation and all of the Qigong is based on relaxation as the foundation, even going into embryonic breathing meditation as the foundation for Qigong. Relaxation is the key, is the foundation. And my teacher says the same thing as well. So let me know what you think. Remember to embrace the woo. And until next time, may your chi flow smoothly. Bye bye.